This presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield, to provide water conservation programs for the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of a growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. This is why TRWD supports many programs that help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you are a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There is also an event calendar where you can find important information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs just like this one. Be sure to check out SaveTarrantWater.com and sign up for their free services.
Welcome, everyone, to talking about pollinating. And of course, everybody's heard of honeybees. And we want to talk about the other pollinators. It is not going to the next one. There we go. So what is a pollinator? A pollinator is anything that helps carry pollen from the male part of the flower, the stamen, to the female part of the same flower or a different flower, which is the stigma. So that could be in an insect, an animal, or wind. We're not going to be talking about wind tonight because we want to concentrate on the things that we can control. So pollinators are in trouble for a lot of different reasons. One major one is habitat degradation, fragmentation, and loss due to development. Developers, when they do develop a site, such as for a home or a shopping center or whatever, their usual tactic is to flatten the land, scrape everything that's there. And so what happens with that is you lose not only the plants, but all the little animals and critters and flying insects that are in there. So that is all lost. Pollution and pathogens are obviously another reason why we've lost a lot of our pollinators. And a major one is pesticides, which we'll talk about later, and climate change. So why should you care? Well, I'm sure that a lot of you've heard that just about 1 out of every 3 bites of food you eat is only because you only have that because of the efforts of pollinators. And not only what you eat, but also the food that you eat needs the pollinators for the food that they eat. Of course, unless you're a vegetarian. And then healthy ecosystems also depend on pollinators. They are what keeps plants going. And those healthy ecosystems help with erosion control, also clear the air, help clean the air, and keep water clean too. And the healthy economy depends on the pollinators, because without the pollinators, a lot of our agriculture business would be suffering quite a bit, not just for our food crops, but other crops that are used for other products. Yes, that's what I said. Okay, so we all know about honeybees, and you may not realize this, but honeybees are not native to our country. They're native to Europe. So what's what's the concern about that? Oops, sorry. Uh, Many of our plants have evolved with certain pollinators, so that makes a big difference on how effective they are. So we're going to start talking about the pollinators themselves. And maybe you didn't know that bats are very good pollinators. This picture of the bat on the top, right? Well, that's the same kind that's in the bottom left, but it has to stick its whole face in the flower in order to get to the nectar. So the fur on its face picks up that pollen and, of course, transfers it to the next flower. Without bats, you would probably, if you'd like drinking tequila or having a margarita, you wouldn't be able to have that because bats are what pollinate the agave plant in order to uh, produce the tequila. Birds are another pollinator. Orioles are really good pollinators, but not in Texas. So the main bird pollinator in Texas uses plants like this one that has long cylindrical tubes, trumpet-shaped flowers. But you might be able to guess what uses this plant. Hummingbirds. So in order for the hummingbird to get to the nectar, of course, it puts its beak and tongue into the flower. And as you can see in this, that demonstrates in this picture, the stamen is on top of the flower. And so when it pokes its little beak in there, that pollen gets on the forehead of the hummingbird. And so that's how it transfers to the next flower. So most people think of bees or bee-like insects to pollinate plants, but beetles are a major pollinator. They're called mess and soil pollinators because they just get on top of that flower and wander around and just mess it up and pick up all over its body and leave frass behind and then go to the next one. As you can see in this upper right corner in that yellow flower, you can see how it just dives completely into that flower. So it's got pollen all over it. Okay, wasps. A lot of people are scared of wasps, but you shouldn't be scared of wasps because they really are not wanting to attack you. But if you feel threatened or if they get near, don't swat at them. The best way to deter them is to blow, blow at them because then they won't feel threatened. They just feel like it's wind. But also, uh, if you fear that there might be a nest nearby, just keep your eyes open. Sometimes they do nest in plants, but these are great pollinators. They do a lot of work for us. And let me see in my notes, I almost forgot. Um, they actually provide, there are 33,000 types of wasps in the world, and they pollinate over 960 different plants. And many are codependent with particular flowers, which means that they developed, evolved with that plant. And for some reason, the plant only lets that particular type of wasp pollinate it. And that particular type of wasp only goes to that type of flower. There is a, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit, which is a similar situation with another pollinator. Okay, flies. And I'm not talking about house flies. These are all flies, believe it or not. They look like bees, but that's the way they help protect themselves. They don't have stingers, so you don't need to be afraid of them. So they do a lot of work for us too. So, and they're just really cool looking little insects, and they hover around and do a lot of work for us. Okay, there's moths. There's a lot of moths do their pollinating at night or at the dusk of day, and some actually do it during the day. You can see all of these are daytime moths, except for the sphinx moth in the upper left-hand corner. It comes out in the evening and goes to a lot of plants that bloom starting in the evening. And this is one of those plants that sphinx moth goes to. It's called an angel trumpet or gypsum weed. And it starts opening up, the flower does, at dusk. And another reason why you want to have something like Jimson weed in your garden, if you grow vegetables, in particular nightshade vegetables like tomatoes and peppers, this is a good one to have because instead of killing those hornworms that get on your plant and vegetable plant or pepper plant, you take them and put them on this plant because it's natural native host. And then it will become that sphinx moth that helps with pollination. And not only that, it smells really good. Uh, if you like sitting out in the evening on your patio and these are blooming, it's kind of a citrusy smell and it's just really nice. It's also fun to watch not only the sphinx moths go after the blooms, but the bumblebees and other insects, they'll sit there and hover around the unopened bloom and sometimes start batting at it, trying to get in. One time I saw a bumblebee just keep punching that bloom. Finally, it squeezed through and then took its nectar, but then couldn't get out. So it had to just punch its way out, and finally it opened enough for it could fly away. It's fun watching those. Okay, butterflies, large butterflies, they don't do quite as much pollinating, even though they travel from one flower to another. They the pollen doesn't stick on them the way it does in a lot of other stuff, other insects, but they still do quite a bit. And they're just another fun thing to see in your garden. Then there are the little butterflies. They do more pollinating because, like this one dainty sulfur in the bottom, you can see he's a little furrier and he picks up the pollen a little bit easier. And then this little Recurts blue likes the tiny little flowers, which is this one is sitting on top of a frog fruit flower. If you know are familiar with that, it's a very small flower and that's just barely peeking out there. And that whole flower top is only about a dime size across. So the little tiny pollinators are very important too. Okay. One of the most important is our native bees. They actually are better pollinators than honeybees, but there are not as many of our native bees as there are honeybees. Honeybees live in big hives and have hundreds of honeybees in a hive, and they can bring honeybees to a site to help with pollination. These honeybees, they're most of them are solitary. The only, maybe not the only, but the only one I can think of at the moment that is a hive bee is our bumblebees. Our bumblebees don't have the big hives like honeybees do. They just have a few, maybe 20, 30 at the most, babies and bee drones in their hive. So that's not anything like honeybees, but they're much better at pollinating per bee than per bee of a honeybee. And you can see why uh, some of the native bees are so good. These two on the bottom, the carpenter bee and the longhorn bee, They are furrier and they actually collect the pollen, the like the longhorn bee right here on the side. It puts it on their back legs to use it to feed the babies in the hive. And of course, not all of it goes to the hive, a lot of it gets transferred. So those are just some of the cool looking pollinators we have. But so how can we help keep them going? So it's really important to have a succession of blooms because if you have something that just blooms in the spring, what's going to feed them later on when there's nothing out there? So you need to make sure that there's something blooming all through the growing season. And that doesn't mean one plant, one type of plant. And it's actually better to have different types of plants, different shapes of blooms and different colors because those things attract different types of pollinators. Like I said on the wasps, a lot of wasps go to a particular type of plant that is um, evolved with that plant. There are lots of other insects that do the same thing. They only go to a particular plant. One is that I remember is one called a yucca moth. And this yucca moth only goes to yuccas to get its nectar. And the yucca, certain yuccas, depend solely on that wasp. So once that wasp is gone, then the yuccas will die out for that particular species. So, and there are other plants that are similar. Okay, another thing you need to do is avoid pesticides and herbicides. Pesticides just don't kill the one thing that you're after, they kill lots of other things. So you don't want to kill all the bees that are pollinating your plants just because you want to get rid of aphids or something like that. And there are other ways to get rid of those pests. Okay. When you use pesticides, a lot of times you're throwing off that balance of the food web because something will eat those bugs, what we call bad bugs. So they're good food for other things like birds. Birds depend on those so-called bad bugs to feed their young, especially moth and butterflies. They feed caterpillars to their young constantly during the breeding season. So instead of using pesticides, what you want to do is try and use natural controls or mechanical controls. Mechanical by meaning like if you see aphids on your plant, you can spray it with water and with a hard stream of water, and that will get off a lot of your plants, the aphids off your plants. Or you can actually take your hand, gloved or not, depending your choice, and just squeeze them off, just pull them off. That's very effective. That gets a lot of them off. Um, and so there's all kinds of methods that people use to get rid of pests. And another one is to buy lacewing eggs or ladybug eggs. Just make sure that when you buy them, they're native to that area because that can cause a problem too if you get something that's a native ladybug like the Asian ladybug, and that can cause problems for our native ladybugs. Okay, now I'm talking about different succession of plants. Here are some of the early bloomers. Uh, Crossvine is a great bloomer. It blooms mainly that one time a year. It will sporadically have some blooms on it the rest of the year. And then uh, gold columbine. There's also a red columbine that's native to our area. It's called Texas columbine. And it's a smaller bloom, but when you put them in mass, it's really pretty. It's not as uh, has a big show of the yellow columbine, but they're very, very lovely. And the added uh, advantage they have in certain plants, like the phlox over there in the right hand corner, is that it's fragrant phlox. It lives by its name. It is very lovely smell. And then golden groundsel at the bottom there blooms the one time in the usually starts blooming late February to early uh, March, and they look kind of like tiny little dandelions, but there's several on a stalk. And then when it finishes blooming, it has a nice little rosette that's green the whole year round. So it'd be like a almost like a ground cover. Oop. Okay, some other things that people don't think about for early bloomers. This one in crow poison is a native plant that pops up in a lot of people's yards. And I wish I had a picture of it. A friend, I had gone over to his house earlier in the year, and his whole backyard had a whole bunch of these. It looked really nice, but most people just mow them down. They look like little onions. They're not. They are in the lily family, like onions are, but they don't have that smell, and they're just pretty little flowers. Four-nerve daisy has an added bonus in that it blooms off and on the whole year. I've seen it bloom in the middle of January, and it's evergreen as well. And Missouri violets, they are not evergreen per se because in the summer, that usually when it gets really hot, the leaves die off and you don't see it at all, but the leaves are green all winter long. So you've got that during the winter. And like I said, they bloom early and they're sweet little flowers, low growing flowers. And there's these other plants here, Brazos penstemon, Carolina jasmine. Uh, so there are a couple of different vines that bloom early. And then don't forget about shrubs because there are shrubs that bloom very early. Agarita is one which also has these tiny little yellow flowers that smell really good and then bring nice little red berries later on that you can eat as well as the birds if you so wish. And elbow bush is another great early bloomer. Okay, of course, we've got lots of choices for spring and summer, and these are just a few. Um, Things like mealy blue sage. I tend to, after it finishes blooming in the spring, I will cut it back and it will come back and bloom some more. And then when it gets really hot, I've cut it back pretty severely so it will have a stronger bloom in the fall. And Blackfoot daisy blooms just about all year long. And wine cups. Anyway, these are just a few of the plants that you can pick. Okay, and here's some for the summer. Again, with the skull cap. Once it finishes bloom, that has a big bloom. I don't have it anymore, so I don't do it. Just cut off about a third of it, and it will bloom again. And just keep doing that. And it's just a really nice plant. And Wright's skull cap is a particularly nice one. Is a an evergreen skull cap. And again, here's the angel trumpet. Okay, there are a lot of plants that are called pulsars. They will bloom, like the lantanas will bloom, go to seed, disperse their berries, and then bloom again. And they just keep doing that throughout once they start blooming. So keep that in mind. And there's quite a few other ones that do that too. Right now, I can't think of them. But also the purple coneflower and maybe some other coneflowers too, I'm sure. During the heat of summer, when it starts getting to be 100 degrees or more, I've noticed that the blooms start looking gnarly. So when it's that hot, instead of letting them bloom, I will cut the bloom stalks down so you just have the rosette. and that will force it to grow its leaves and root system and have a stronger bloom in the fall. Because those summertime blooms, when it's 100 degrees, are don't do much for the pollinators and they're not very pretty. Okay, fall. There's quite a few fall blooming plants. And this one on the left, oops, sorry. The one on the left is frostweed. And that's typically, if it's a fall blooming plant and you cut it back 2 to 3 times before July, they get bushier and bloom more in the fall. This in this picture, the frostweed had not been cut back, but normally, if you do that, they get real shrubby, not shrubby looking, but fuller and, like I said, more blooms. And the frostweed is particularly important for monarchs because it starts blooming at the time the monarchs are coming back down to go to Mexico for their winter time. Indian grasses, not so much necessarily for the nectar, but for cover and nesting material is very important for wildlife and pollinators. They can get in a bunch grass and spend the winter there and take not have to worry about getting caught by predators or the cold. So don't forget about providing that for them too. And let's see what else. Okay, another thing, speaking of uh, providing things other than nectar for our pollinators, in the spring or in the fall when things start dying back, leave at least some of your dead stems out because that helps the pollinators with all kinds of things. This is a chili pekin stem that I discovered these little longhorn bees on one evening. They were just there, since they don't have hives, they find some place to go roost for the night. So this is what they use during the evening, just so they have something to sleep on and relax through the rest of the night. So it's important that you do leave some of this. If you don't like it in the front yard, please leave at least some of it in the backyard where if people are complaining about you're not cleaning up your yard. Okay, it's also important to have water for your insects and other pollinators. So you just make sure that when you have it, you make sure it's cleaned out every couple of days so you don't get mosquitoes. And you don't have to have a fancy dish or fancy bird bath to provide water for them. It could be just a saucer out on the ground. Another thing that's great for pollinators, especially in neighborhoods where everything is just really clean and clipped, and all you see is lawn and a few bushes and a tree. During the winter, they need some place to go. So this is what helps the pollinators during the winter time, or also to provide places to lay their eggs for the next generation. And not all pollinators use the same size hole. So just making one of these is great to collect to provide for the pollinators, and you will get more in your yard. It's fun to watch them go in there and what they do with some of the bees, they'll go in, they lay the egg, go and get some kind of material for the egg to eat when it hatches, and then lay another egg and keep doing that until that stem is full. So you don't have to get real fancy like this one on the left. That was a college, I think it was, I can't remember which college it was that did this for an experiment. But you can do something real simple, just a box with sticks in it, a um, what is it called? Cinder block. You can get one of those. Just make sure you find out which way to point it because sometimes they're particular about the direction depending on the light. They may not want west light getting in, shining on their box, on their sticks. So these are very effective at helping the pollinators. Okay, that's pretty much it. These are some of the resources that I use to get information. And I wanted you to particularly pay attention to the last one, Doug Tallamy. He is an entomologist and he's written quite a few books. His first book was Bringing Nature Home, and he talks about the importance of native plants in the landscape and why it's better to use those than exotic plants. I'm not saying you can't have any exotic plants, but try to have some and native plants. And there are also videos that he has done, presentations he's done for other organizations, and you can look those up on YouTube. He has beautiful pictures and he explains things a whole lot better than I do. So, okay, here's another resource that I just found out about yesterday. It's put out by Texas Parks Wildlife Foundation, and it's an app that is only concentrates just on Texas and the plant, how to make a garden fit for pollinators. So I have not tried it, but it sounded pretty good. So I thought maybe y'all would like to check it out. And if you want, there's the QR code that will connect you to being able to download the app. Okay, and here are some nurseries that are in the area. This is not by any means uh, comprehensive, but these are some very good ones in this area. And you can look at this again if you want to when you go check out the video later on when you're sent the connection. And other ways to get native plants, of course, is our sales, Master Gardener Spring and Fall Sales, Nipsot. Anyway, here's some more. And that's pretty much it. I'm sure I've forgotten quite a bit, and I've stammered a bit, but I hope you enjoyed the show.